Morning, everybody. I am here with the beautiful Beck, who your third time's a charm now. My amazing hypnotherapist and friend. So, friend first and then hypnotherapist. So, the reason for today's chat is I called Beck about a week ago, and she can share her own journey on this timeline as well. Feeling really overwhelmed with a lot of the pain that's going along in the world, a lot of unemployment, a lot of people feeling stuck. And I felt like it was slowly shifting from kind of caring and panic and feeling helpless and hopeless to kind of almost moving into a catatonic phase where people felt around me, myself at times, almost feeling so overstimulated with horrible news and horrible things, and then feeling kind of gross and yuck, trying to be positive simultaneously, and just like living in that confusion, almost then kind of becoming a bit of a zombie robot. So my first port of call always is Beck to shine some perspective on it. And together we thought it would be a really cool resource, this episode of the podcast. If you are feeling in any way the same as myself, or Beck shares how she's feeling, maybe how we can shift that a little bit. And so both of us wanted to kind of donate our time, donate our resources to making something that people can hopefully use or share if anybody needs it. So without further ado, the longest intro ever, the beautiful Beck. Hi.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's all
So
right.
I when we were speaking initially, I guess that my mind always jumps to the nervous system. And just before I got on here, I had this, I guess, something that just dropped into my mind, which was a post I actually wrote on, is that our nervous system tends to choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven.
Ooh,
Yeah,
bugger.
bugger, I know.
A
And
familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven.
yeah. And it
Yeah.
can become very habitual living in a particular response. And I guess that I'm going to give a little bit of an overview and talk a little bit about perhaps more so the freeze response than the other parts of the responses of the nervous system. But what we can begin, because I'm always looking at building positive structures of the mind in the direction we want to go. And it's always about that direction we want to go rather than kind of circling in the problem state or circling in the chaos we're experiencing, although that's very valid, and being able to send ourselves that acceptance to that part. It's okay that that part's here. It's okay that that hopelessness and helplessness part of us has arrived.
Mm.
But also, well, there's other parts of us. So could we invite in another part to have a conversation with that part, which sounds a little bit loopy, but is also really helpful to be able to kind of give it some, it's like a wise guide coming in to,
Mm.
give some, rational thought or rational understanding to the circumstance at hand. So I guess to give you an overview is that with our nervous system, we've got different branches of it, which you'll already be really familiar with because we've talked about. So with the freeze response specifically, it's quite layered. It's not, it's not as straightforward as what we've made it out to be. So we can have different levels of what we're experiencing within that freeze response. And when you talk about helplessness or hopelessness, is that helplessness can be more around the anxiety, and the hopelessness can be a little lower where we're starting to fall into that real freeze, shutdown, collapse, immobilization space. So
Mhm.
freeze is, if you think about it from an animal perspective, of watching, so you're looking at an animal and you're like, is that animal dead or is it playing dead? So because it might have been chased by another animal, right? And so that's that collapse, that's that shutdown. And it's a really primitive response, and it's our oldest part of our nervous system as well. So it's often experienced when we have had this overwhelming, enormous amount of chronic stress, and it's suddenly going, no, I cannot handle this stress anymore. I can't handle the chronic stress that's happening, the overwhelm that's happening. I'm shutting down, I'm switching off, I'm checking out. See you later. So that means that we go into what's kind of like a numbing state. We might be doom scrolling. We might be canceling plans with people. So what people see and what people perceive as opposed to what we're experiencing can be quite different as well. So people might not really understand, but when we start understanding those nervous system responses, it allows us to be more compassionate towards ourselves and compassionate towards others. So what I guess I mean is that if people are noticing you canceling plans or you're shying away, you're reducing contact, because ultimately we start to fall into those places of shame and guilt.
Mm-hmm.
And they're really kind of low vibrational emotions, very, purposeful to a point to be able to have that emotional experience. But when it becomes unresourceful, we start to close people off. And that's that shutdown, that numbing. We might be spacey in that kind of, we're lacking clarity, we're procrastinating, we're experiencing that really low mode demotivation, but a lot of people might see it as laziness. It's not that you're lazy. It's just the fact that you've been under this chronic amount of stress that your body's gone into like a full shutdown.
And
And
just speak to that because I guess I recognize the freeze response. It was probably the scariest place that I've been in because I do feel like it's a breeding ground for depression as well.
yes,
Just
yeah,
because I feel like then you start realizing the things that should make you laugh or bring you joy don't. It's almost like that fatigue, burnout, exhaustion.
yes,
You almost feel nothing. Like we can maybe perhaps if you're scrolling and you're now suddenly desensitized to some of these horrific images that are online and stuff, is that kind of, if
yes.
people are still confused, am I in freeze response? It's almost when you're just kind of, your emotional scale is probably not moving either side of sort of a 1 or a 2 for anything. Would that be?
Yeah, so you become very disassociated from your body. It's often people that I work with for chronic pain are in a freeze response and they're very detached, very disassociated from their body. And so a big part of what we work with is we're working with top-down processes and bottom-up. And what I mean by that is we're working cognitively, but we also need to work somatically with the body to get back in the body. So that chronic stress has been so much that we then it's like I'm disassociating from all things because it's been too painful or too much or whatever the circumstance has kind of played out in our lives. But what I also want to say about that hopelessness and helplessness as a reframe is that even if we are experiencing that freeze response, is this a time to heal? Is this a time to be able to perhaps have that space and time for ourselves to rest? And we've talked a lot about rest in terms of it being, I see you're
Something we
smiling.
both
I don't
struggle
know if
with.
anyone else can see any video, but it's like, there goes Kim just having a little smile, like,
Oh, they
the
won't
rest,
be shocked to
I'm
know I
working with
struggle
it.
with. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Is
I'm
that,
working with it conceptually more than actually actively, I would say. But
yeah,
yes,
is that
uh,
rest can be a really productive thing for us to do. So perhaps that freeze response is also ultimately switching on something to say to our bodies, now's the time to heal, perhaps giving us that space and time. But ultimately it is it takes us a while to thaw out from a freeze response. It's not automatic. And you can be, like I said, it's layered. You might be experiencing both freeze and fight and flight. So this is where it gets complicated, is that you could be ebbing and flowing from it. So I call it functional freeze, or it's called functional freeze. And what that means is that you might be going about your day. So you've got to still get out, go to work, get kids ready or get family ready or whatever it might be. And then you come home and you collapse, you shut down, you are on the couch just doom scrolling, you're watching Netflix series after Netflix, or you're just spaced out. And that's very much going from both those states. So you're amped up and revving, maybe you're firing up with some coffees as well to keep that adrenaline, epinephrine, cortisol online. But then later you're moving more into that freeze response.
Now, if you don't intervene, because I'm sure a lot of people listening are like, yep, that sounds like every day. Thanks, guys, or that sounds
Mm,
like this last year. What are some of the problems with staying in that for too long? Like,
mm.
should everyone be motivated to be trying to thaw out, whether it is just to rest or what? I'm sure that it can become a habit and a state
Yeah,
itself, right?
becomes a familiar place, it becomes habitual. So you can then it's like very normal to then seek that out over and over again because we are creatures of habit. So that's where we need to work quite gently, compassionately, kindly with it. But this is the education piece, right? This is I see the nervous system as the Catalina wine mixer. If we can understand the different responses and what we are experiencing in it, as opposed to what people are also perhaps their perception of us, is like I say, it allows us to be compassionate towards somebody's experience, compassionate towards ourselves. Where we're ultimately wanting to get back to is ventral vagal. So that's our rest and digest. That's where we feel calm and connected. And we're set up to spend 97% of our lives in that space, which I always laugh because I feel like there's so much pressure when I say that. But there's no pressure, obviously, as a human race, where we've become overly contactable, we've become overly stimulated, we've got the sense of rush, all of these things around us that's adding to this idea of chronic stress that's perhaps creating thought patterns as well that aren't so resourceful for ourselves. And we know, science shows us that our thoughts can activate what's called the amygdala of the brain, which is that threat response. So suddenly we are going into that threat response again, whether it be, fight, flight, or freeze, or layered freeze response.
Does concern and empathy or over empathy also trigger
Mm,
stress? Like it's like, although
mm.
well intentioned,
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
seems like out of care. Would it be better not to care? And I know it wouldn't, but it's an interesting thing that, yeah, if you are really
Mm.
invested and really in a lot of pain from hearing stories of unemployment or war or like you're almost being an empath or being really concerned is also at some level, is there a healthy way to do that without being damaging? And how do you, I guess asking you, but asking how can you balance that so you're not then inflicting pain on yourself?
Yeah, and this becomes quite layered and I almost think complex as well, depending of what point of view we look from, because, we've talked about another response within the nervous system, which is that fawn response, that pleasing and appeasing, wanting to almost like rescue others and, oh, okay, that person's in pain, that experience, oh my gosh, they're not employed, like they've lost their job. What can I do to fix this? What can I do to help them? And so it's almost like then we become conflicted with our own boundaries. We lose our sense of self within that whole process because we haven't just put ourselves in their shoes, we've stayed in their shoes and we're now walking in them. So I think that comes down to, I guess from my perspective, or how I would approach it, is around being able to strengthen those boundaries, still have compassion, still hold empathy for somebody's circumstances, but not become so involved with it. And I've done this in the past myself, especially with people. I guess I haven't even known that well, but I've become invested in their like journeys of cancer,
Mm.
and they're young, they're our age in their mid-30s or whatever, and suddenly then they've passed, and I'm so invested in that whole journey of watching it on social media and playing out. And this is the thing, we didn't even have access to this type of social media 25 years ago, so we didn't have those same stresses or that same approach. And naturally that pain is so heavy that you go straight into that freeze response. You start to shut down and just really feel heavy for that family. So this is where it's being able to exercise those boundaries. We can still have compassion and care about what's going on in the world, but not to our detriment.
Mm. For two people talking about this who it is at our detriment because we do care. That's why we're here. But we are taking action, which I guess is one of those practical steps, like how can you shift from feeling helpless and hopeless to feeling helpful or making that shift? And then how can we thaw out some of that freeze response? I wondered, I don't know if that was maybe one of the
Yeah,
activities you'd like to do today
yeah,
and a good
yeah,
way to
for
set it
sure.
up, or if there's anything you kind
Definitely.
of want to add before that. But yeah, it's
I
very
think,
generous of you to kind of maybe walk through something that people can practically do.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And I suppose this brings me to the thought patterns of what people are having. So, if we're thinking perhaps thoughts that, and it's becoming really conscious to the thoughts that we're having and then creating reframes. And this is where I kind of look at things like affirmations. Now, I want to just point out that I don't create affirmations where you suddenly stand in the mirror and you say the opposite, because you're probably not going to believe it, right? Suddenly, if you started saying, oh, the world is a wonderful place to be when there's turmoil and wars and poverty and all this horrificness going on, that's you're going to go, oh, this is a joke. So this is where we have to start to create something that's actually authentic and create a learning state from it. So a great way to do this is when we get into a relaxed state. So I'll kind of walk you through it of some ideas. They're going to be very generalized because I don't know each person's individual circumstance out there. So if we keep it general, then people can kind of understand what they can do. This will be more from a cognitive or top-down approach rather than a bottom-up approach, but I will talk about those bottom-up approaches because to thaw out a freeze response, one of the most important things is being able to work with the body. So the body is going to play a paramount of a role, a really critical role. Yeah.
Mhm. And I just want to add on to that. That's one of the biggest things you've taught me as someone who spent a lot of time in talk therapy. Whilst it's great, it is definitely heady. I want to understand. I want to logically do it, and very resistant to include my body in it because it's kind of giving all these telltale signs of things.
Mm.
So yeah, if anyone just needed a bit more of a zoomed out approach of what that might mean.
Yeah.
Okay, so top down, what do we do?
Well, the other thing to mention, when I mentioned around the chronic pain thing, I worked with somebody who, when we were doing what's called a progressive muscle relaxation, and I always really remember this, is she could only get down to like the neck level because she was so strongly in that freeze response. We've started to look, we've had so much movement. It's amazing to see the, transformation within her, but it's, because we've been so detached from our body. So when we do this together in a moment, and if people have a go at home, bring awareness to what you're experiencing in the body. Is there a numbness that you can notice, or are you noticing that you can't even really feel into the bodily experience, or are you more in that headspace? I think awareness is always that wonderful space to start building some understanding as well. Yeah. Cool. All right. Lovely. So this will be a little bit of both. What I might bring in, we could do a little bit of somatic stuff as well, is that, have you ever heard of like a butterfly hug or butterfly tap?
Yes, you taught it
Yeah.
to me after the
Oh, did
miscarriage.
I?
Yes, you
Oh,
did.
wow.
And I
Okay.
was like, that's so beautiful.
Yeah, so we can, yeah, like I love that. It's like a little butterfly. So you can cross it over and you can just, allow yourself to kind of tap like this, or you can hold your shoulders and you can just kind of stroke up and down as well. Okay. So what I want you to do is you can, wherever you are, make sure where you're not driving or anything if you are going to partake in this activity. It's just find just a lovely, comfortable space to take a seat, and you can close your eyes down. And what we're doing here is we're just going to create a really safe space. Okay, so just a lovely, safe space that's almost like that we can just utilize in a resourceful way. So just allow to come to mind a place of comfort for you, just as you take a few deep breaths. Visualizing or forming an impression, using your imagination to just imagine a safe haven or a safe place that's unique to you. Now, perhaps it's familiar or it's brand new or it's something in between, however you experience it. Now, everything in this place is to remind you that this is your place of calm, connection, content, comfort. This is your place that's just wonderful for you. Just as you imagine that you're there now. Now, in this place that you're creating and you're choosing, I want you to notice the surface that supports you, that causes you to feel more centered or grounded, or perhaps even drifting, as you just relax more deeply into comfort. That's it. Now let's go ahead and just make this experience even more resourceful. So in this place that you're creating and you're choosing, I want you to begin to see what you see, to hear what you hear, and to feel these good and wonderful, calming, comforting feelings. And you can even turn it up like you would a radio dial to just the right amount for you. Because your mind and your body are powerful. And you can turn that radio dial to just the right amount for you. And just notice that you can become aware of your body in this state. Noticing how your body's feeling, scanning from the top of the head to the tips of the toes. Maybe even becoming aware of the hair on your head. I wonder what that feels like. And in this place that you're choosing and creating, you can visualize doing what it was that perhaps was initially keeping you stuck. Maybe if you felt a little shut down, or maybe you'd isolated yourself off from friends or family, you could just play with this idea and have fun with it of connecting with a loved one, having a beautiful conversation, or moving your body in a fun way, maybe dancing, or perhaps you're just simply going for a walk. Just imagine yourself doing those things. And maybe even if you'd like to make it more resourceful, you could add in some fun music. So something that gives you a real charge, and just imagine your body moving to the music. And notice your body now. Notice how it's feeling. Notice if there's any tension that's just fallen away. And if you've noticed recently that you've had some internal dialogue that maybe isn't that nice, maybe that inner critic has been a little loud, maybe you'd like to consider saying something to yourself that feels true. Maybe it could be, I'm working on being kinder to myself, or this too shall pass. It's just a season. Or whatever else feels right for you. And in this experience, perhaps you could allow yourself to breathe more deeply, because you'll notice that your breath can help too. Breathing in through the nose and out through the nose twice as long. Because our thoughts can be a reflection of our nervous system. And our language of what we're saying can either activate our threat response, or it can do the opposite, and it can stimulate that lovely healing space within the body, that rest and digest, that place that is full of joy and creativity and calm and fun and play. And imagine what it would be like to play. We can bring the body back into a space of balance. And just go ahead now and allow yourself to make this experience even more resourceful if you choose to. You can add in whatever you feel is necessary. Or if this is already feeling really good, you can take some lovely deep breaths, maybe give the body a nice shake or stretch, and then take a deep breath in all the way up to the space behind the eyes, and then just opening the eyes and coming back to the room.
Lovely.
Good. So, a little bit of background with that is, sometimes if we're feeling like, we're out of control or we're not feeling safe or whatever it may be, we can create that safe space in the mind through visualization. And visualization's more of a cognitive approach in some ways, but then when we solidify it with feeling, that's when it becomes more somatic. And we can add in also something like that butterfly tap or butterfly hug. We can stroke down our arms, using our breath as well. I always find that, our breath is a great place to begin. And, if we're having, thoughts or something that I'm feeling like, I haven't got control of this, it's like, well, what do we have control of? I'm always in control of my breath, right? It makes it realistic, makes it a learning state, makes it true and authentic. So yeah, more around, something like that can just be a lovely experience to just begin to work with that freeze response in a powerful way, really.
I feel like my energy has shifted dramatically.
Oh, cool. I love that.
It's really beautiful. So that
How
would
does
be
your body feel?
warmer. I would say it
Mm.
felt warmer. Um, it's interesting. I really like personified the devilishness inside me that I'm always battling as like a green witch. Like it was kind of cool to actually like, yeah, that was kind of cool. And you said say something to it. I just kept hearing like stop ruining everything for myself. Like that's kind of that what I think I'm struggling with. Like just that if I personify the kind of negative voices
Mm.
and the negativity that's in my mind 99% of the time, yeah,
Mm.
that exercise felt like it gave a little bit of room for the other parts of me that are like obviously there because they are working really hard in an overtime just to kind of like take up more space, which was really cool.
And knowing that all those parts of you are actually doing everything they can to keep you safe.
Totally.
Even
Yeah.
if they are sounding unresourceful and or not so nice, it's knowing that that part of you exists for a purpose and just being able to, be able to talk to that part and be like, I'm grateful that you're here. Thank you for showing up. But I also know that perhaps there isn't a lot of truth to what that is. So I'm going to consider this from another lens, maybe. And it's then playing with this concept of like looking at it from different levels, like a bird's eye view. Now,
Mm.
this is where we go off onto a tangent for me because not all people are visual, really super visual. So perhaps, and really with the freeze response, we're wanting to work more with the feelings inside the body. So when you said the warmth, beautiful. Okay, so we're experiencing warmth. How big can we make that? Can we grow that through the body? Is it, what does it look like? What color is it? And adding these coding to it because the body codes everything. So let's start to develop on that coding to code it with, warmth and a beautiful color like blue or whatever it might be, and then spread it out through the body.
Yeah.
Mm,
Lovely.
yeah.
I feel like that's a great exercise. Thank you for like de-thawing that because you're right, it forces you to be present, which is something I really struggle with. And I think
Mm,
in freeze response or overwhelm, you're anything but present, right? You're almost floating above and yeah, despondent, disinterested. Um, I'm
yeah.
conscious of time, but we do have 5 more minutes. I just wondered, was there anything else that you sort of feel like might be a good tool for the toolbox, or just some comments or
I
notes?
guess some comments or some notes in terms, I mean, there's so many
Okay.
different types of tools, but to consider things that are sleep. Sleep plays a massive role. Like, what is people's sleep looking like? And are we getting adequate sleep and adequate rest? Are we going to bed early enough? I know they all might just seem like run-of-the-mill things, but they are massive. Nutrition, are there any, and if you are a female, what's your cycle? What's your cycle like? Have you got is there any kind of imbalances coming up? Or when I say imbalances, like perhaps, challenges that are coming up with, often, for me, I know that I've been working through going into a real lull before I get my period. And, it's like the depths of what feels like a freeze response. So I'm like, my progesterone's been offline. So I've been working with other practitioners to be able to help to bring myself back to homeostasis. Because, that's where that self-critical loud noise starts to really rev up too. So really, how do we be more compassionate in those moments?
I'm only laughing because that's like totally me this week. I'm like,
Yeah,
am I depressed? Am I like, what is going on? Like,
yeah,
very sensitive. And I'm like, oh, that's so sure. You're just about to get your period. But I'm like, this is more than that, though. It does feel like it's heightened.
totally.
Yeah. And then, of course, doing the non-sleeping, waking up multiple times in the night, medicating with sugar. So all the things that I shouldn't be doing because I'm trying to band-aid one ailment.
Yeah, and that's the thing. But then still being able to meet it with self-compassion. I think that is honestly the ultimate goal or intention. And as that can be obviously tricky, but sometimes when we're in those phases of our cycle, we can look. I heard this thing recently where you can look in the mirror and just not like what you see. And I was like, oh man, that was like just kicked me in the guts, because what I really thought with that is, oh, now I understand why, those dips and those lows, and it really feels like you're going into that shutdown, that numbing or doom scrolling. And that's where that kind of is starting to work with, the likes of naturopaths, nutritionists or something to support you to come back with, food and perhaps
Yeah.
the right supplementation, etc. So I think that those things are also key as well. And even just using our breath, right? Our breath is such a powerful tool. So making sure, are we breathing? Are we holding our breath? And being able to have that experience of just acknowledging it. So even in the shower, it's like, okay, great, I'm by myself right now. I could just, allow myself to notice the water just cleansing off the day. I always love this one, cleansing off the day. And while that happens, I'm just going to deepen my breath and just take a few lovely deep breaths in and out of my nose and notice how my body's feeling. Notice how I'm holding myself right now. And when we put our arms up like this is going to sound silly. I'm going to actually add this in. And you look up. When you look up and you hold your arms up, you're sending a signal to your nervous system of hope and positivity. And I can almost guarantee that it is very hard to be in like a hopeless state when you look up like this and have your hands up, because your body language, you're changing it. And then if you actually bring in like your breath at the same time, like taking some lovely deep breaths and saying even to yourself, I am here, just because you are, and that's a truthful belief, that suddenly you may notice just a shift, even if it's just a tiny shift, right? A micro shift.
I love it. It's so funny because yeah, it's the opposite of what your body wants to do when you're in that phase, which is the fetal, the curled up, the
Yeah.
hunchy over. Yeah, it's almost like forcing your body, tricking it into being like, nope, we're doing great.
Yeah, it is. It is. And hey,
Yeah,
there's nothing wrong with that, right?
no.
There is, yeah, sometimes tricking, and playing with it. I think it's just like, okay, let's play this as a little bit of a game. But the
I
big
did have
things,
to laugh on a little. I took my mental health for a walk the other day, like stupid walk, stupid sunshine, da, da, da. And then of course I came back and I was like, do feel better. God damn it. Like, it's like,
Damn you. Yeah, yeah.
oh, beautiful flowers. Ooh, yuck. Like, it's like,
But I
oh,
think that, when you are feeling calm and connected, so the calm and connection, if we can play more and invite that playful, creative state in, so do something, yeah, even simple things like doing something creative, doing something from your childhood, like drawing. And I can't draw, but coloring in. Sometimes I just sit there and color in. It's quite cathartic, yeah. And, that just allows for that sense of creativity.
yeah.
It's hard for your freeze response to be super active if you're in a creative, playful state. Move your body, music, put a good beat on and dance.
Yeah, even if
Dance.
you don't want to and you hate it, right? It will
Yeah.
shift.
Yeah. So if you get a thought in your mind that that's a good idea, doing it within like a few moments, like 5 seconds, and then for 5 minutes. But if you leave it for longer, your brain will try to talk you out of it and be like, no, of course, I don't really like dancing. Oh, no, that's silly or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, do it and act on it immediately if you can. So much like how you took yourself out for that walk, you must have acted on it immediately. So you couldn't talk yourself out of it. And then, even if you were like, stupid walk, stupid flowers, suddenly you're probably like, oh, I love that warm sunshine
Oh,
and
it did. It took like no time at all. I had to laugh at myself. I'm like, why are you like this? Like, just go outside. It's stunning out there, but I'm like, and then like, yeah, of course. Of course it helped, but
yeah, just
you,
having that acceptance, inviting that part in to accept that that part's here, but also bringing in other parts that are playful or curious,
yeah,
seeking curiosity.
so good. I love you.
I
You're
love you.
Thank you for this. I know everyone will just be jumping for joy with their hands up in the air, looking up. Thank you. This was a real treat. You're an incredibly generous human. I love you with absolutely every being and fiber inside me. And where can people find you, Beck? Because I know that you've actually been doing some in-person stuff as well, group chat talks.
I'm working towards that at the moment. Yes, so there is
Awesome.
going to be
Yeah.
some. So the best place to probably find me is through Instagram, which is BE_hypnotherapy as the handle, or otherwise my website, which is www.behypnotherapy.co.nz. So they're the two places where I hang out the most. And yeah, if it's like I say, I'm trying to create events that are, just either we freebies or that are, $25 or something, because I know how hard it is out there for people at the moment. So if we can do something to support people's emotional and mental wellness, I'll do it.
You're wonderful. All right. Go have a good day, everybody. We love you.
Thanks. Bye.